So yeah, I feel that empathy and any number of authentic connections can be created as easily online as offline. I have never met my teacher. He's the deepest influence in my life. I've never
Wow.
met him. I've studied for him with him the last 10 years online.
Greetings, everyone. Today we have with us a very lovely guest, Vasundhara Vee. And she is a renowned name in the Western music space in our country. She has been active in the finest soul, R&B, jazz ensembles in the capacity of both a collaborator and a curator for the last 15 years. She's also worked in the capacity of a full-time visiting faculty member for the Bachelor of Performing Arts program at NMIMS, and she's performed at several premier programs in India and on diverse stages in France, Turkey, Malaysia, Dubai, and Singapore. And she's also performed live with Ranjit Barot, Dhruv Ganikar, Louis Banks, Loy Mendoza, Mahalakshmi Iyer, and Mohini Day, and Sean Freeman. And she's also an author of a debut novel called Big Dreams, Bold Choices, which essentially is a handbook for all of the emerging indie musicians in the country as we're speaking. It's an absolute honor for all of us to have you on board, Vasundhara. Hope you're doing well.
Thanks, Vrnda. Thank you so much. I'm very excited always to talk to you. Really been loving the work you've been doing with Abhay. Yeah, it's lovely to talk to you every time.
That means so much. In any case, since it's been 15 years in your case, you see, I mean, you've been such an active member of the indie music industry, in the indie music community. You're in a position to sort of, draw parallels and like a contrast between like the virtual navigation of the music industry and the offline setting of the music industry, which leads me to my very first question, and that is, what have your experiences been like pertaining to the virtual gigs? Has the pandemic impacted the presentation and delivery orientation of your performances in any capacity?
Yeah, well, I'm a stickler for booking terms, so I haven't done an online gig. Like, I never took on a booking. It's because, in the beginning, the whole thing was so like there were no rules. It was all too nebulous. People were just reaching out to book your time for things that it wasn't a booking. They really didn't know what they were doing with it. They just wanted you to turn up and sing. And I find that quite useless. I don't mean to be mean, but I just feel that, in the beginning, there was no plan. So I was like, if there is no plan, then I don't want to put my time into it. After that, I started noticing that, if I had to book a studio and, had to do it the right way, then my costs would have gone up too much. And, the kind of rates that people were offering at that point were a little absurd. So I ended up not doing online gigs. And I also learned, because this pandemic has been in two phases, I saw what that drop in rates did to people when gigs started for a little while. Yeah. Because then, others are like comfortable that you're ready to exchange your time for this much, ab kya hoga? Or, the pandemic is over and we are still broke. So, so thankfully I managed to avoid that. But what I did focus on instead was upgrading myself at home, studying, recording myself, publishing some of it, but mostly like just trying to listen and see what I could fix in my voice and, just make it into like an intensive study time, which I love because I'm a nerd.
That's really evident. And we really dig that about you, like the nerd. In any case, that's such an interesting perspective to, sort of ponder over. But I mean, has this sort of, I mean, since you talked about, sort of working on your development as an artist, did that help you in sort of, access the audience better? Like, I mean, did the audience sort of empathize you in that capacity, like as an artist who's sort of, going through different phases? Since you mentioned the two phases of the pandemic, did that impact your interaction with the audience? And, like,
No, not at all. I think, well, I don't experience anything different. Um, and I think this is because I started long ago. So most of my relationships are offline. And so what that does is that, people know you as a flesh and blood person. Their interests are not necessarily only to see you creating content or pictures or whatever. Like, there was this time when we were doing an audit of my Instagram, right? I was sitting with someone who's a pro at this. So they were like going through, and what I loved was that it was my singing posts that were most engaged. Nobody necessarily cared about how often I posted. There was no dip in engagement just because I had posted like one post after a month, and nobody cared about pictures. I love that so much because I was constantly so scared in the beginning. So I think that's a positive outcome from just having had relationships, a very flesh and blood in the same room sort of relationship with listeners. And another thing I want to bring to people's notice is that, social media is going to keep changing. Its rules are going to keep changing very weirdly. And it's important for us to look at it as a shopping window for the moment. And the shopping window has its own little rules, right? Yeah. But the rest of the structure of your work is actually outside it. And that's just like a display place. That's not your career. For some people it is, because once certain numbers are achieved, you can charge for it.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority, that's not a career. That's a place to display what you do. But what you do needs to be like a much wider story. So in that sense, no. And because I was not earning as such from live gigs, obviously, I just took to studying and teaching, and that was absolutely absolutely fine for me. It was as happy an engagement in terms of music for me. So that's all I did. I didn't exactly get the question. Were you asking about, how is it now versus if this had happened way before, or like what?
Yeah, I meant to say that since you've, experienced the realities of both of the worlds, right? Like you've been teaching in the offline setting and you've also been teaching in the online setting. And you've been also, I believe, I mean, I was under the impression that you were also saying yes to, all of the virtual gigs that were going on and about recently. I mean, just, with all of the NH7, I think last year, I think NH7 happened virtually. So I was just under the impression that this is what artists are sort of now, most of us sort of switching to that alternative. So I just wanted to understand that contrast and, how that sort of impacts empathy. Like, does the audience empathize? Like, for instance, in an offline setting, you interact with the audience. There's an empathetic interaction. There's an exchange of intellectual properties, right? Does that is that being hindered by sort of the digital barriers that we're seeing around? Or you mentioned social media and algorithms, right? You mentioned that social media resorts to different systems and in order to survive better in the market, right? Because it's essentially also a market. And we're also part of the gig economy, right? So does that sort of, induce like a competitive nature, or does that affect an artist's creativity in some capacity? That's what my question was leading on towards. So yeah.
So I see three sort of different realms, or three different topics to discuss. One is the concept of empathy versus competition, like how to
Exactly.
be authentic and how to make authentic connections despite being in a competitive space. And I just feel that, um, if you look at the things that you follow, it's all the stuff that you connect to, and you connect to it for a reason. So I feel that energy is not only carried through your singing, but obviously through your pictures, if you can communicate energy through pictures. But most importantly for me, I am able to translate energy through words. So copy is super important. And I feel that that's a resource, because people, just like people can hear uh, uh, when you mean what you say, people can also sense when you mean what you've just written.
Yeah.
So you can actually really counter a lot of the, uh, uh, very overly, surface, overly show based interaction. You can counter that with copy.
Yeah.
And nobody's stopping that. People, I mean, the algorithm actually supports that, because it likes the fact that you might write more, so that people can stay longer on your post, and it's better for their business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel that empathy and any number of authentic connections can be created as easily online as offline. I have never met my teacher. He's the deepest influence in my life. I've never
Wow.
met him. I've studied with him the last 10 years online. And, there have been times, and he's so kind. There have been times when, I've been broke, and I told him, I can't study right now because I don't have money. And he'd say, well, emails are free. And he was so sweet. He sent me a bunch of things to do. And so, you can have this, and he's like a father to me, a musical parent for sure. And I have many, many, many such relationships with audiences and with mentors and with people that I'm helping out. So I think it only helps us to believe that the internet can be anything that you want it to be. And the competitive thing is not so much the internet; it's more us. Because
Such a cool point.
because the internet is just making stuff available. The thing is, people are not taking it upon themselves to overwhelm the internet with lovely things and with the real things.
But do the numbers not get to artists and sort of, their, I mean, it's like quantifying your art. Like, doesn't it challenge the purpose of subjective expression? I mean, I'm just like, it's a genuine question that I always wanted to, yeah.
That's if you let it. I mean, you just want to look at the numbers as statistics. You wanna compare your posts and make minor differences between the posts, so that you can understand what people are actually responding to coming from you, because it's obviously a two-way connection. And then you just multiply the stuff that people do relate to. It does not matter whether you have 1 million people or like 20 people on your page. You can still understand response, and you can still magnify that which is connecting properly. This is different from saying this person did this and got these many likes.
Yeah.
Right. So one thing is, we have to train our minds to look at those impressions or likes or engagement or whatever as data and not as self-worth. As soon as that happens, then you got a problem with yourself and you got a problem with someone else. And I wait, I was going somewhere else with this. Yeah, so the thing is that, just because we are connecting it with assigning the wrong meaning to it, it's making artists create things that others have won with.
Yeah.
and they're wasting a lot of time. I just feel that there's always a space for authentic connection, and you must utilize this. You must know how to study how people are responding rather than the number of people that are responding. The other thing that I really want to say is that I love my own story because I have a tiny page. I have some 3,500 people on my page, and that constitutes as tiny as hell. But the thing is that so when it comes to people thinking of earning off of social media or whatever it is, right? Um, they would think that you have 1 million people, and hence a brand comes to you and tries to get you to manipulate people to buy just because you said so, right? But no brand would really come to me, even though now there's a concept of nano influencers and micro influencers and all that. No brands. But whenever I've gone live, I've made a whole bunch of money. And it's not been through advertising, but it's just been because of the type of connections that were made and what was being offered, that within the next couple of months, I made a whole lot of money. So it's not also just about numbers, but looking at who's in those numbers.
Yeah.
Who are the individuals there, and what not only influence, but what sort of connection is it? Is the connection deep enough that they're going to stick with you for life and they're going to pay for the services that you offer?
So you're trying,
because look at
you're talking about
no go ahead.
You're talking about humanizing this process. Is that what you're sort of?
It has to be.
Okay.
It has to be, because the internet is not a dead space. It's wherever we make it. We are the ones that are populating the internet. We are the viewers and the creators. And so it's 100% in our power, no matter the algorithm, because, I'm going to learn about this slowly and gradually. But what I'm seeing is that the opposite story is also true. You can have a small page and you can earn a ton from the internet. And wait, there was something else that I wanted to share with you. It just popped into my head. But I've lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Whatever. So, yeah, the whole point is that who are the individuals that are choosing to interact? And that, if you have, like, say, 300 people that have seen something and you're like, shit, this has been a flop, right? But one of those people is someone that can change your life. Well, that completely changes the story. And I think that one has to remove that veil, and one has to come out to the extent that one can let oneself be fierce. Because then there's also that self-consciousness that, oh shit, I'm in front of a camera and all that. How much of ourselves are we comfortable with? That's number one. And then how do we interpret what people are seeing that as? So yes, it's 100% human. I can't even tell you it's more human than anything, because, people are, people take things to negative extremes, such as, not having accountability, therefore, doing and saying anything on the internet. But if you see it, people have also displayed extraordinary amounts of courage and vulnerability also because the internet has protected them. That distance has protected them. So, there's always this yin-yang. Oh, here's what I wanted to tell you. That, no, forget it. I'm going to get to it later. Yeah.
Go
the thing that I wanted to tell you about that whole influencer thing, right, is this is also something I talked about in the book, is that, there's breadth of influence and there's depth of influence. So what happens is that, if I see someone who has breadth of influence, right, say who has a couple of 100,000 followers or whatever, and they are pitching something to me, and it's not, it's whatever, it's somebody that I know of, but I'm not connected to, that ad is going to make no sense for me. In fact, I'm going to be kind of doubtful that, this person's doing an ad. And so, but, if like Sting, or if like Gregory Porter, or if like, I don't know, someone advertises something, they might or might not have that breadth, but what they would have in my case is much more depth
Depth.
of connection. And so that depth of influence, whether or not there is breadth, is one that actually converts, because those things actually convert to alteration of people's behavior. And that depth of influence is only possible when you're authentically connecting.
That is such an interesting perspective. The breadth and the depth. It's just, wow. The nexus sort of pans out well. I mean, I absolutely resonate with what you said, essentially. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, about the algorithm and, sort of navigating through the digital space and how we're the creators and the consumers, and it's the entire onus lies upon us as an audience and as like a creator community, music community. Yeah, I absolutely understand. But I would like to slightly deviate from this tangent, and I would like to talk about the financial bit and, sort of how the music community is like a part of the broader gig economy, as I mentioned before. I mean, in my understanding, in my assumption, I would like to sort of stratify the music industry into three like mini industries per se. There's the indie music industry, there's the corporate/wedding industry, and there's the Bollywood industry. If there's any other industries that I'm missing out on, just let me know. So, I mean, the pandemic struck the industry, right? I mean, there have been no shows happening whatsoever. I've heard there have been virtual gigs again happening all over the internet, but there's no scope for any offline gigs currently, especially after the second wave hit us. So, I mean, are you associated with any of these industries in like a greater capacity than the other? And how do you think that sort of influenced the financial losses that the music community in totality incurred last year? Because I would like to think the major chunk of income for a musician comes from the wedding corporate industry, in my understanding. So, do you think this has to do with all of the financial losses that happened last year? What do you think? What is your take on the entire discourse?
It's too varied. What people have gone through, some musicians haven't felt a thing, and some musicians have faced starvation. In fact, it came really too close to reality for us, because there was someone very close to where we live who was starving and who was on the brink of taking his life because he was too embarrassed to ask for money. And then there's a musician called Prince Mullah who started Artists for Artists, and they've been supplying groceries and supplies to artists' houses, and not only like indie artists, but like people who are in like the marching wedding bands, the Barat bands, and all those musicians. So many people, the kind of horror they've gone through, and these guys actually for the last 1 year they've been feeding people. And so that is one end of the spectrum of experience, and then on the other end of spectrum of the other end of the spectrum is artists who haven't felt a thing, because they had been doing it long enough to save up, or they were financially more savvy, or whatever it is. But it's a whole range of nuanced experience, and we don't know, we can't really place a finger on either the artist or the industry or whatever, because obviously gigs would have had to shut down. How can we blame that, right? But we also cannot blame an artist for being that close to music that he chose not to do any other thing than to play. So I would never vilify an artist saying, why didn't you think of other things and, get yourself into this kind of position? Because there's a lot of that discourse going on, and I feel that that's a little, that lacks a little empathy. So I don't know whom to blame, and I find it hard to understand it. But I feel that, people are beginning to diversify. I think people are now even beginning to look at fairer ways of selling their intellectual property. NFTs are becoming a thing.
Yeah.
People are, I love that whole concept. I love if this would, quickly become our way of protecting our intellectual property and monetizing it. Because, this has been my problem with things such as Spotify or whatever. That's I'm not so overly excited to put stuff on it, because I'm serving another's vision, and another is creating basically a place for all the music in the world. And uh, what if an artist does not want to be the biggest pop star in the world? What if he does not want those numbers? What if he just wants to make some meditation music for people who are hurting? Right? So then you can't say it's your fault that you don't have followers and that's why you make no money from us, but now you have nothing to do, so you got to keep your music here because people need to find you. So I think that's utter bullshit. It's overly homogenizing its expectations from artists, because artists need to, knowing what scale. There's fame, fortune, and being Michael Jackson is not the only scale that you can aspire to.
Exactly.
I don't. So I feel that, with change in technology and with all these NFT type of things coming in, things are going to change. And for me, I've always been a little bit of a, I don't have FOMO around losing gigs and all that, because I trained myself that way. I had to emotionally train myself that way. So in that sense, I don't necessarily feel like a sense of loss or whatever when I'm tiding through when times change. And this happened once many years back in Delhi, when what happened was there was a sudden crash in rates, right? So music schools opened up, which was obviously amazing, right? But all the students from the music schools, they were all dying to perform. And they said, we'll pay you to make us perform. We'll perform for free. We just want to feel those lights on our face. We want to sing in an amplified room. Okay. And so what happened was that the venues who didn't care, they started paying peanuts. And then the problem was that the musicians that were senior and that were pro level, they didn't stick to their rates, and there was this crash. I think I discussed this on Abhay's live once.
I think so.
Where, way back in the day, per night at a club, we used to make so much money. We used to make up to a lakh, 85,000 to a lakh. Yeah.
Wait, because independent gigs.
Yeah.
That's
clubs.
Unbelievable. What are you saying? For real?
No, but to be honest, we also did exactly a similar type of billing a year and a half ago, just before the pandemic. So the point is, again, I write about this in my book as well, that the rate is the most flexible thing in the world. We aren't to confuse rate and quote. And but forget about that. The story that I was telling you was that there was also that big slump, and then musicians said, "What the hell are we gonna do? We can't play gigs for $2,000." And the truth is that slump is continuing till date.
Wow.
With that which was when life was cheaper and less inflated, that which was super lucrative has crashed and has stayed there, except for a few people who said, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm going to play at my own rate. You want me, otherwise get lost. So some people just stepped back and allowed all the stuff to change, and then for a new system to emerge, and then to see how they can get back into the system properly. And some people panicked and they said, okay, we have to do this and all. And then they kind of faced the brunt of it. So again, in that situation, as with the pandemic situation, all kinds of people find themselves in all kinds of circumstances, and you can just thank God that you were blessed to make the choices that you were, that you managed to make.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I don't know what else to say really without being wrong about it.
No, I mean, what you said about Spotify as well, I feel like they also hold some responsibility towards an artist in sort of like like a dignified way. I don't know if that's the right word to go for. But I mean, since there aren't like sort of no structural legalized policies in place as well for the performing arts community. I mean, even if there are certain policies, I think they mostly cater to the needs of the Indian music community, right? Because the music industry sort of stratified like to such a great extent that when we talk about the music community, most of the times we're actually missing out on the lower strata of the industry that is sort of constituted of the barats, as you rightly mentioned. I mean, I will be honest with you right now, as I was referring to the three-tier music industry, I did deep down sort of miss out on that community too. And I think that sort of is an elongation of the quotient of privilege, right? I mean, this is how I would like to perceive it. It depends. I mean, the kind of choices that we make and the kind of decisions that we take, it's all essentially an extension of the quotient of privilege. And
100%.
yeah, I really resonate with what you said. Absolutely.
Yeah, and privilege is on so many levels, not only socioeconomic, but
Yeah.
If mental health, having a healthy mind is a privilege, and sometimes just being in the right place. Sometimes, like for me, I live on an island with a lot of trees. I have a tremendous privilege called oxygen. Privilege can be of so many types. The type of land that I live on is a little higher, so I didn't experience the Mumbai floods the way other people did. So, there's all sorts of privilege, and of course, it all ends up being invisible because since we don't see it, we think that we either miss people or we judge people.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But Vasundhara, what would you like to say to all of the budding musicians who sort of, I am a budding musician or like my generation per se, and we're sort of, going through this pandemic. And I mean, I was expecting to perform with the Revisit project, and so many other young people were hoping and expecting to perform. And that's sort of been disrupted by the pandemic. So what would you like to say to all of the budding artists and budding musicians from the community? And what would you like to say to people, especially who are struggling through, digital spaces and, sort of how to navigate them, essentially, how to create a market brand per se? Because essentially your art is a commodity too, right? We live in a capitalist world and it is a commodity that at the end of the day, we're sort of selling it to intellectually to a particular target group. So what would you like to talk about? I mean, what are your views on that?
The first thing I'd like to say is that practice your heads off so that you can hit the ground running. Don't get too comfortable doing takes and retakes and then lip syncing everything. I think this is something that Saurabh uses as a rule, and I took it on from him, saying if we are in a kind of produced world right now, let us at least try to get a single take that works. So may all our takes, video takes, be single takes, because that way we are still preserving the hygiene of life, that we can still sing a song through and it's going to sound fly. So that's one thing. Of course, life is going to change. We're going to achieve herd immunity in this country and on this planet. But when it's time, the music scene should be blazing. We shouldn't, rather than lamenting the fact that we've lost these 2 years, we have 30, 40 years of playing left. So let us start at a level that's unimaginable to even us. And the second thing is that, about the financial bit and about the self-branding bit is that we are not only branding our music, but, as a person, what are forget about branding. Let's just think about, making a living first, right? Because once all of that is settled, you can go crazy with how you want to communicate. Um, what if you're good with kids? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be a teacher, a singing teacher. What if you're extremely empathic, interested in mental health, and love children? You can start doing events for kids. You can start having, like, super educational, life skill oriented, like, play dates. That's a full business on its own. That's something that has so much of a demand that you can't take care of it on your own, and you'll end up with a business that brings in a lot of money and also does something that you're super at. There are people who are good at writing who must kind of take on roles to sharpen their writing and make money off of it, because it's only going to add to your music. So what I feel is that musicians especially often forget to count their other blessings other than music. Music, as their skill and passion, overshadows many of their other loves and passions. And when that is the case, then the options or the exploitable skill, or, your offering to the world, these are all different ways of saying the same thing. Your offering to the world gets diluted and becomes one-dimensional. So yes, you can, groove, and you can sing and you can perform. But, when it comes from, let's say, somebody who's a mountaineer, right? Or if it's coming from someone who's a chef, or if it's coming from someone who works, let's say, who volunteers at the NAS Foundation, right? The same music will carry different weight. And you want to, it's all that other energetic information that you step into any room with. So I just feel that we need to look at ourselves as who we are outside music, and you want to allow the music to filter through that, because that's when people are going to palpably sense something different happening when it's coming from you.
True. That's true.
So just that, be fierce and be real. And what else can we be, really?
So essentially prioritize your way of livelihood over, that should be one's first priority after this pandemic is over. And then secondly, you sort of focus on other secondary aspects and characteristics like, branding. And
even during this pandemic, because, darling, it's not a either or, it's a synergy. Those are also things that you do. Those are also contributions that you make. So, and what I love is the idea of not having one thing that you do. Because that's when it becomes, that's when we become like music people versus janta. Yeah. So I feel that actually does take away from the richness of experience that we can offer. So it's not choosing just livelihood over music as you make money. Instead, I like to look at it as what else can you offer to the world? Because music is your main offering, but you have many other offerings. What else can you offer in the meanwhile? I'm going to tell you the story. I was watching this interview by Elizabeth Gilbert, okay? And she said this amazing thing. And I think that was a turning point. It was a real day of reinforcement for me. Because she said, why are we looking at music and saying, I like you, I want to spend time with you, but you got to bring me money now? She's like, I meaning she. Yeah. She said, I look at my art and I say, I'm going to do everything to support you so that we can do this for longer. And I totally love that, because that justifies every other activity and places it in context to what you want to do, because your promise to your art is lifelong. But it does not mean that it's contingent on your art making money. It's going to make money at some point, that's for sure, because you're amazing. So I feel that, I really loved her way of phrasing it, that I'm going to do anything in order to ensure that we can continue to do this. And a big part of that anything is making money so that you can continue to sing, keeping your family okay, keeping your health okay, and your mental health okay. And so all So that's a big basket of things to do. And within that also, there's so much you can offer the world. So it's actually a win-win rather than a tug-of-war.
Yeah. Challenging, I think what you mean by that is essentially challenging, like perceiving music in a linear way, like sort of like letting it engage with like other parts of your life to sort of let it immerse into more empathetic ways of living. I think that's what my takeaway from your,
Yeah. And if it's a language, then it's got to speak a story that's outside language.
That's such an...
You're not only a linguist, you're a person that's speaking. So the life has to speak using the language. But we are all about syntax and grammar and chords and chops.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, yeah. So, Vasundhara, what are your future plans amidst the new normal? What are you looking at, for the future?
I'm part of the people who were blessed not to have had too many major life changes. Of course, personally, there have been losses in the family. People have passed away. My dad.
I'm really sorry.
And yeah, but so many people are going through the same thing. But in terms of work, I feel that I'm going to just keep building on what I had and continue to be thankful for the fact that I can still sing, I can still do sessions for people, and I can still teach. And these are the three ways that I know that I can serve best. And as the world changes again and again and again, as I've seen through the last 15 years, I'm going to keep adapting. And and for now, I'm okay. And all I can say is that we can do everything in our power to help the musicians that are having a tough time. So stuff like Artists for Artists is feeding people, and then other people are helping people with their mental health and all such activities. So whatever it takes to help people while staying alive is what the future plan is. And I don't care for world domination. I care for people living and people being able to honor their lives and honor music, and that's it.
Wow, that's a great perspective. And what are you going to say to all of the people who are looking forward to reading your book?
Please read it. Please answer the questions for yourselves, because I've been procrastinating on making the physical copy because I have an issue with using that much paper and all that, and you always have to like print a big consignment every time you print, and it makes me feel like shit. So please get it in its ebook form because it's just nicer to nature. And more importantly than buy my book and read it, please type, is that there's so many questions inside that people must answer for themselves, because those are the mistakes I've made and those are the questions that have bailed me out. So do it for yourselves and hit the ground running when the world achieves herd immunity. Just go for the kill at that point.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm definitely going to go read your book. I've been looking forward to reading your book. And Vasundhara, it was lovely talking to you. This was such a lovely conversation, such a lovely interaction with you. And we're hoping to see more of you soon in an offline
soon.
And
thanks for calling me on this, and it's been absolutely wonderful hanging out with you, and we're going to hang out offline more later.
Yes.
And take care of yourself, and this was lovely.
Thanks for watching our videos. We work hard to make sure you keep coming back for the content we produce. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel by clicking the bell icon below.